Welcome to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank studio. I hope you're having a great day. And as we continue to celebrate the amazing people who have worked so hard to make Mississippi such a great place to live, work, and play, you know, from time to time, we're going to honor someone who's no longer with us. And I had this goal that we would look back at one particular community leader who is not the, you know, it's interesting. I look back on my time at the Sun Herald, and I would go to all these meetings. This guy, Richard Palmer Mueller Jr., who passed away on January the 6th of this year, is not a guy that you would see at these meetings very often. He was just doing a lot of his stuff behind the scenes and kind of out of sight, out of mind. You may have passed a building up on 49 in New Orange Grove area. It had RPM on the outside of it. You didn't really know what that meant. Well, it really stood for Richard Palmer Mueller Jr. He was born in Lakewood, Ohio, back in 1949, and he eventually found his way to coastal Mississippi. But more recently, you know about him because the world's largest train museum opened in Gulfport, and he and his brother Glenn collaborated with my dear friend Cynthia Walker to build that, and it is getting rave reviews. But you know, if you go back to when he was born in Lakewood, Ohio, to his contributions in this train museum, there's a lot of points between those points that tell an incredible story about someone's commitment to a community, this incredible company that he built, his partnership with his brother Glenn. And I didn't want any of this to pass and not look back and honor and celebrate Richard's life. His untimely death, sadly, he's not a guy that was ready to die. I can tell you that because he had so many plans with himself. And the long and short of it is he left a legacy. So I've asked Glenn Mueller, his brother, his little brother, and Cindy Walker to join me today as we look back on Richard Palmer Mueller Jr.'s life. So anyway, thank you all so much for joining me today. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Very honored to be here.
Yeah. So Glenn, we'll come back to you in just a second. But Cynthia, when you think about Richard Mueller, the opportunity you had to work so closely with him and Glenn to build in this like record pace, this incredible museum that you guys built and that is getting rave reviews today. What does it make you think about when you look back on him? Because you didn't get to know him until later in his life. So what do you think about when you think about Richard?
That he was a big kid. You can never be around Richard without seeing that trait surface at some point. You know, he might be upset at some time and he might be telling you about what needs to change or what needs to be adjusted. And at some point in all of that, suddenly that child would show up and you'd end up laughing. It was really hard to have a disagreement with Richard and come away with it feeling frumpy or unhappy.
Isn't that a beautiful thing to say about somebody, that their childlike spirit is the thing that people connected to? But he was also a very serious businessman who had achieved some incredible success in his life. Glenn, you know, we're gonna get into some of the details here, but when you look back on Richard and you only have a short time to tell someone who may ask you about him, how do you reflect about him?
Well, Richard was my older brother, and everything we did together, or he did, it was really a lot of fun, and he liked to make things bigger, better, faster. He liked to move very fast. He had only one speed, and whether it was flying a kite to building a Domino's Pizza franchise to having a wedding reception area up in Michigan, whatever it was, he always wanted to make it bigger and better and make it the best, actually.
Yeah,
and have fun doing it. So
I have a family. I have my father's brother's son and his family have a wedding business called the Matthews Manor outside of Birmingham, Alabama, and it is a very significant operation, very significant company. But that is no small feat what your brother built there as well. Hey, why don't we do this? Because I want people to really appreciate the franchise. When we talk about RPM Pizza and this Domino's franchise that he built, tell our listeners how significant that became.
Well, we arrived here in Mississippi on the coast in 1981, and at that time, Domino's Pizza had about 200 stores, and we signed an agreement to build 120 in less than 10 years. We wound up doing it in less than 5 years, and we eventually went on to build 500, build or acquire 500 stores in 3 countries, over 9 states, and but what just started here with the one store really, Richard had so much experience just starting out as a part-time driver, working directly with Tom Monahan, the founder of Domino's Pizza, and he definitely had a lot of opinions to give to Tom on how things could be better, but those two worked a lot of magic. And so Tom allowed him to franchise the states of Mississippi, Louisiana to build 120 stores. And Richard really changed the whole business model for Domino's over the years.
Yeah, the story of Tom Monahan is well documented. For Richard to have the opportunity to work, side by side with an entrepreneur like him, what an awesome opportunity. But he actually started delivering when he was at the University of Michigan, right?
He was, and he was going to engineering school, and he was, the dean had 2 lists, and he was on one of them. So
yeah.
But he decided he really fell in love with pizza and with Tom Monahan's vision of having the busiest and best pizza place and pizza delivery company. So he fell in love with that. So he did drop out of school, borrowed some money from my parents, and then had his first franchise when Domino's Pizza only had like 20 stores.
I heard
today. Sorry?
You go ahead. Finish your thought.
Well, today they've got 20,000 and they're in about 90 countries. So it's a little different environment. But back then, Richard is so innovative and came down here. And a lot of the things you see, not just in Domino's Pizza, but you see in the whole food delivery business, a lot of those were invented here right on the coast way back in the 80s.
Well, Glenn, what's interesting about this and the fact that Richard had an engineering mind, I heard a terrific conversation recently with Elon Musk, and he was talking about engineering and physics. And he said, physics is about explaining the way it is. This is the way it is. Engineering is about solving problems. And so to bring an engineer's mind into a business that you would think, what kind of innovation can you do in the pizza business? Well, I think Richard proved with his engineering mind there were lots of problems to solve and lots of ways to get more efficient, and so many different approaches that would make franchisees more successful and make RPM and ultimately Domino's more successful. And he certainly did that, didn't he?
He absolutely did. I mean, he's known for a lot of the inventions here, like just really having drive-through and a pickup window in a pizza delivery place wasn't popular, but every one of our stores here on the coast has it, and throughout our system, most of them do. But he really put that into thing. The other thing that the car top sign, the portable car top sign to identify Domino's Pizza or whoever's coming to your door, and it's good advertising. Those are things. But the other things that's behind the scenes that people don't realize, that there's sort of a secret sauce in Domino's Pizza, and he helped create it along with many others, is a network of franchisees and the corporation and the way we work together to solve problems. And that's where that engineering mind comes in. But he was always great at going out, finding whoever's doing best in building sales or managing people, and then bringing those ideas back, perfecting them, and then sharing it back in the system.
Yeah. So Cynthia, in your dealings with Richard Mueller later in his life, and you talked about this childlike curiosity, but when you began to really get your arms around what he had created in terms of his understanding of trains and miniature trains and the like, you really got a chance to see when you have a guy who is all about total immersion. He defines total immersion when it comes to the area that you work with him on. That had to have been fascinating.
It was very fascinating to watch. First off, you knew you had this great mind, and you're talking about Tom Monahan at Richard's service Tom spoke and he acknowledged Richard had truly saved his company several times for those innovations. So as you're sitting there just doing a day-to-day routine and looking across the table, a lot of times I would remind myself who I was sitting across from, because if you were with him, that never was a sense that he projected to you that I'm someone that you should recognize and give homage to, if you will. But when we're looking at the past 2.5 years where we put this thing together, Richard's knowledge of so many elements were things that were critical to being successful in this area. And so I oftentimes felt like I was sitting with a really great mind. And I've said many times I love to be around smart people. And I've told the two brothers before, it's amazing to me how their relationship works. There was some engineering going on with that too.
So
I love to watch it, and I would see them at times. I think, okay, they're about to blow up, and then they would bring it down.
Cynthia,
so
when we get back on the other side, we'll actually talk a little bit more about that. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Glenn Mueller and Cynthia Walker, talking about the untimely death, sadly, of Richard Mueller. We'll see you after this break. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank studio, and I'm just honored to have my friends Glenn Mueller and Cynthia Walker joining me today as we look back at Glenn's older brother, Richard Palmer Mueller Jr., who sadly, untimely died on January the 6th. And I mean, Cynthia, as I think about you've been a nonprofit consultant. You've done work really all over the country. You've had the opportunity to work with so many boards. And, the beauty of my being involved in the community is I've seen so many different people who are involved in the community. Some prefer to sort of be behind the scenes. And they're very important, believe me. And they bring vision and tenacity and money and commitment and smarts. And then you've got sort of the movers and shakers that are in the midst of it all, trying to make change happen. And they're the ones communicating with the public and bringing things together. I mean, it takes all these things to make museum worlds work. When you think about Richard and sort of what he brought to this train museum, you've had the opportunity to rub shoulders with a bunch of people. So when you say that Richard was humble and he didn't want to present himself as someone that you should pay homage to, the guy thinks the way you said it. It's fun to work with people like that, isn't it?
It really is. And knowing that Richard had this enthusiasm that just bubbled on every topic that ever came to his mind, it was always fun. Sometimes it was frustrating because you would not be in on all the details before you wanted to be. But it is one of those things that I think that when you see a truly brilliant mind, they like to be in a lot of different areas. They are looking at things that will come out of this action. They're always 10 steps ahead. And after Richard passed, Glenn and I were sitting, I'd gone through some notes I had. Richard had all of his actions laid out for 2024 as well. So knowing what he would want us to do in the coming months isn't much of a guess because he already had it laid out on paper for us to follow. I just know that I grew personally as a leader and also just as an individual watching and being around him. And I think that's when you become a truly great memory, is that people say, I had something that I took apart from that, and there was a legacy I feel he established in me. When you talk to people about how they feel about Richard, I've not heard anybody that said, I don't like him. They would be frustrated by them, or they might have not liked one thing that was done. But in the end, he had that ability to work with any personality, I think, which, Lordy, I wish I had that skill. And he could bring them from wherever they were back to where he needed them to. So it was a great learning curve in there that I was able to watch and absorb from it. And I really feel blessed to have had that time to do that.
Yeah, Cynthia, that's a beautiful way to describe him. And again, you bring a lot of experience to the table in making that observation. Glenn, I had the opportunity not long before George Schlegel passed away. I had an opportunity to visit with him on this show. We had visited before. We had sort of the initial visit where we talked about all the time in the community and his life growing up in West Gulfport and how he became this, the CEO of Hancock, and then ultimately Hancock Whitney, and then retired from that to be mayor of Gulfport. There was an interesting point in the conversation where I literally asked him, how does he want to be remembered? And he said, immediately, I don't want to be remembered. He said, I want the things that I was involved in to continue. If I had some role in those things continuing, that's what I want. Because if I played a small role in creating something that causes people to want to come back here when they go off to school or whatever they're doing, or maybe they have to leave at some point in their career, but they come back here. If I have a small role in bringing people back here, then that's what I want to be remembered as. I think that's a beautiful way to say it. I wonder how Richard would have answered that question, Glenn.
Well, I think the best way to answer is through his actions and what he's done. And we did talk about the train museums in particular, that was going to be our legacy, and especially his. And he taught me a love for trains at a very early age. I just want to also reflect on Domino's, because he actually had retired now 20 years ago. So he was, when we got here in 1981, he was a franchisee of record for 20 years. And then he went on and did some other ventures with the Castle Farms and Hungry Ducks petting farm. And then, but also the museum, which was for the last 10 years, he's been very active with that. So, but what he did in Domino's really is sort of what you're talking about, or what George was hinting to, I guess, or saying, is that because he really was able to have his family involved, have me involved, but he also had a lot of other people that he's helped franchise, many of them from the coast, dozens from the coast, but we've helped over 150 people actually own their own franchise and operate. So he always wanted to help people be the best they could be, but he also understand the value of the part-time drivers. And he, through his efforts and through our training, et cetera, we have over 20 people, 20 drivers that have over 30 years experience. So,
wow.
But he came from being a driver, but he also wanted to help people that wanted to have a career in franchise. When it came to with the train museum, it was definitely something that we knew we wanted to go on way beyond our years. And we wanted to set it up that way. And thankfully, the train club, and he got the membership from 5 members up to 50. And then he's we got Cindy, and she's helped us build it, and we got it constructed in an amazing time frame. And so now I think it's our goal is to now take that and take it to the next stage.
That's a great way to talk about that. And by the way, when we come back, we'll continue with you. I want to stay on this line of thinking with Cynthia. One more thing to say, but I want to come back and talk about when did you fall in love with trains. But Cynthia, one other point, and I think it will be part of Richard's legacy, is I had the opportunity to get to know Leo Seal. And for people who don't know who Leo Seal was, he was a very significant figure in Hancock Bank. And he would send me these handwritten notes. And I had to tell you, one of my biggest regrets when I left the Sun Herald to go to Mobile is I had a file of all of his handwritten notes in this file that I didn't think to get. And in it is so much wisdom. But I remember it's toward the latter part of his life, he would talk a lot about Stennis Space Center. He always was a huge supporter of Stennis and the Infinity Center out there and what it's become, because he believed that science and math were kind of the keys to Mississippi's future. We needed to focus more on that. Education was really important to him. And he was a guy I've often described as a guy you couldn't say no to. In a way, the train museum is more than just an attraction. I mean, it has a learning component, and it has this experiential aspect to it that when kids go there and they zoom in on whatever it is they're zooming in on, and they see the complexity of it and the detail of it, and you take it to the next level, as you and I have discussed before, sort of the learning part of this. the train museum will have the same kind of impact that Leo hoped Stennis would ultimately have on kids. That is a huge legacy of Richard Mueller's, isn't it?
It really is. And, people ask me that sometimes because they even come through here and aren't in touch with how much they're learning while they're walking through. If you go to our significant layout, which is the coast layout that Glenn has offered to the museum, it gives history of each of those landmarks that are there so that those folks who are coming from the 35 states that have already been here, they're learning about who we are as a culture and what is going on the coast for us. But it's also bringing parents and children together. We have a STEAM shop for those who might not have been here. It is all STEM activities going on. And we have parents and kids sitting there together. We've even learned over the last couple of weeks that just some things that might be fun, tapping into that childlike personality, which is, believe it or not, a coloring time. We have a section of time each day when the families can go in and they literally sit and color together. It kind of amused us at first, but now we've understood it's important to them. So there is an experience at this museum apart from the trains, and it is one of those that indicates what we've all embraced as just a love for learning. If it's where that crank goes and how it's operated at a port that you might see because you've got a miniature one here for the kids to operate. What is it that drives those trains, and where do those buttons take you when you press them? All of that was to try to spark curiosity, that love of learning that it seems that Richard always wanted to bring into what he was about. And then it is one of those things that this community is trying to embrace the full community through this museum. September is special, where we honor those who are looked at for their abilities with disabilities and all the other areas that are coming up. And then there's just the fun times. All of those, I think, reflect his generous and fun nature. We'll be here having an Easter egg hunt, which he loved, that they had across the street. Now we have 12,000 square feet to find those eggs, and so we expect it's going to be even more fun this year. So those are the things that I think are part of that legacy that you spoke about.
It's multifaceted, multidimensional. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation about honoring the legacy of Richard Mueller. We'll see you after this break. So many of us may know Richard Mueller from RPM Pizza. We may know him from the smaller train museum that was on Pass Road for so many years. And then more recently, Traintastic Museum, this incredibly large, amazing place that has so many different dimensions to it that Cynthia Walker was talking about a few minutes ago. We had entire shows around it with both Cynthia and Glenn Mueller, Cynthia Walker and Glenn Mueller, who are with me today. Just evolution. Now, people are beginning to recognize this incredible legacy that Richard leaves. It's pretty amazing. And Cynthia, one other point I want to say. My daughter Tori is a teacher, and so she's always with the kids. She has two kids, but then with her kids as well in classes. She's taught several different grades along the way. And what I find interesting is that if you give my kids like a regular cardboard box, just a box, it could be any size, one they could get in, or maybe one they can't get in, and some crayons, they have more fun imagining that and drawing that and coloring that than the most sophisticated electronic devices you could ever put in front of them. That's something we can't lose a sight of, is it? I mean, that is so important, isn't it?
It really is. We have one birthday party room because we have birthday party spaces here. It's called the Create Room because we want to embrace that. And in the summer of this year, we're going to actually have a creative space for our guests to go in that room so that they can explore some of their own imagination ideas with it. It's amazing how much we tell children what we want them to do instead of allowing them the freedom to imagine and go from there. And so all of those elements, if we didn't have that kind of imagination, we might not have ever had those locomotives that we depict in our miniature across the entrance there. So it's one of those things that we need to embrace. And in this building, we are focused on the STEM activities, science, technology, engineering, and math. because we know that those are all related to this field. Trains are very intricate, and keeping these trains at this size running, they are very much more time consuming than probably anyone would imagine. Those are things that we're working with middle schoolers, and we just completed a contract. Those kids don't have a clue that their future could be different if they would tap into those job possibilities in a STEM activity. And it's one of the things that could change their lives. So this museum has a real possibility of influencing our community, allowing us to bring in who knows what type of employers in the future. And yet it seems so inconsequential if you just stop and don't think of all those elements.
You know, Glenn, coming back to you, when you and Richard would be in the museum as it is today, and you'd watch kids go to the museum, this could be any of my grandkids who've been there multiple times, and a kid stands at any one of the many miniature train cities, literally, and they're just enamored with whatever it is and whatever is happening in that moment. You or Glenn, you or Richard, and especially Richard early in his life sort of understood this, is not surprised by that at all. I mean, that's the thing that drew you guys to this, isn't it?
Exactly. I think that's what makes it so much fun, is to talk to people or watch them. And one of the things I think we guarantee is everybody that comes in is going to say, wow. But to watch it as a child, Richard took me to one of the best layouts in Lakewood, Ohio, where we grew up. And that's where we started setting some goals and dreams, was at that point, because we could see what we didn't have, or we could see what we could create. So one of the things that, now this is at teenagers. We started out with one ping pong table, a second, a third, a fourth. We got up to 12. And we amassed all of these other trains from other kids that were getting out of the hobby, and it was just a blast. And one of the things that we could create is we actually went on a trip across country in a car, unair conditioned, went through the Rocky Mountains, and saw the Santa Fe train go through the tunnel, and in its beautiful mountains. You don't have a lot of mountains, in Ohio or even this part of the country. And so we recreated that. And so, and we could do it. We could build little buildings and things like that. If you go to the museum, you're going to see a sketch of drawings that I did as a 12-year-old. Yeah. With the help of my brother, to design this bridge and the layout and this, that, and the other, all drawings, and they're pretty much to scale. I wasn't perfect, but anyhow, and so that's where we can, I think, really inspire people to dream and to build, and to, while they may be playing, they're actually learning and they're growing, and then they can celebrate when they go home and they build their own little diorama. So it's a lot of fun. The hobby's fun, but it's not just for kids. We're not just a children's museum. Well, children of all ages, but there's something there for everybody. So it's really awesome.
So, Glenn, what's interesting about Richard's story is that while that love of collecting and sort of being enamored with it never really died, literally, it was with him for his entire life. What was interesting about it, though, is as he and you as well got older and got more means, it took the love of that fascination to a whole new level in terms of how you went about collecting these things, your knowledge of what was going on around the world. I sent Cynthia a note the other day. Rod Stewart, of all people, has this fascination with miniature trains. Just found that fascinating. But when as you guys got means, as Richard got means, he took it to the next level, didn't he?
Absolutely. I think there's the club in Goshen that actually lost their lease, and they only had a handful of members. And so he bought a building, a second building, a third building, a fourth building on Pass Road on the north side, right at the corner of Hughes pretty much, and Pass Road. And they created something very special. So what Richard and I did is as that grew over the last 8 years, we said, okay, how can we take this to the next level? The location across the way, he bought that building, and then we then had the designs and everything. And what happened is that we just donated that all to, it's a nonprofit in train testing and all that, and it's really been fun. But that's just the beginning. That was just like step one. There's several of the steps that we think that the museum can really go to the next level. And so I'm looking forward to the future, and I really appreciate the support and all of Cindy's work and the train club's work, and the state of Mississippi got behind us with the grant. So, we want the whole community, and for tourism too, for people outside to really see not just the world's largest model railroad museum. Yes, we have over 30 layouts, every scale, every era, but is to really, feel the joy and the love that goes into each one of these layouts. It's really fascinating. And then we've got the component with the STEM class, everything that Cindy talked about. It's really it's a magical thing.
Cindy, that's legacy. That's legacy. That's what attracted you to do this, isn't it?
I'm not sure that I've thought much about my own personal legacy, but I loved this whole concept and wanted to see it perpetuated as well. It's very interesting because every element of this museum was done with real forethought. Even the location. Many people have said, why would you put it where you put it? But the forethought was we could revitalize the Pass Road, Hughes Avenue area. And so there was this constant putting the community in front of what it needed and how it could dovetail into what was hoped for. And in that case, it feels like a great honor to have been a part of it.
Yeah, that is really cool. Did you have a thought about that, Glenn?
Oh, absolutely. No, that's Richard and I were, we love Gulfport, and we love, the coast of Mississippi, but, we've had our headquarters here for RPM Pizzas in Gulfport, but that area is it's right there by the airport. Pass Road's a main thoroughfare that we all very familiar with. That's where our first store was located. So anyhow, it's a great area, and we're really happy with the turnout so far. So it's been great.
I should ask you just while I'm thinking about it, how's RPM doing these days?
We're doing really well. We're the pandemic really affected all businesses, but I think we came out very well. Domino's Pizza was very supportive. We got a great franchise. It just continues to roll out better products, better training. And so we adapt that right here. I'm in our pizza college, and we've just helped 3 other people franchise. One of them is my son, Rogers, who, graduated Long Beach along with my other 4 children. 2 of the others are still in the business. But anyhow, he's up in Indianapolis. He just took over 37 stores up there. So we're continuing to help people franchise at all different levels, and also to offer great career and part-time opportunities. But no, our sales have been very strong, and we're going to continue to figure out how we can give our customers better products, better service.
So Tom Monahan came to speak at his funeral, and we'll talk a little bit about what he had to say, and then we'll have some closing thoughts as we kind of finish up the final segment of this special show honoring Richard Mueller, who passed away recently. We'll see you after this break. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank Studios. We continue to focus on Richard P. Mueller, who passed away in January. And, he had lots of goals still to do. And the Train Museum was obviously a huge accomplishment. But, I would think that his legacy will be felt in a bunch of different ways. And I will mention one of those about building teams here in just a second. But before we go any further, Glenn, Tom Monahan, the founder of Domino's Pizza, spoke at his funeral. Sort of what was his take, and then also mention about the time he wrote $50,000 on a napkin about Richard running a marathon. Tell that story as well.
Well, sure. Tom and he had a special relationship, and in terms of he was one of the first franchisees. My brother Richard, dropping out of school, going. But anyhow, Tom, when Richard franchised down here in 1981, he, as a departing gift, a challenge. My brother was, over 250 pounds. But anyhow, he put on there, if you run a marathon, I'll give you $50,000. He wrote on a napkin. My brother's very, money motivated, but, he's never run even a 100-yard dash in his life or anything, or a mile or anything. So But if anybody knows my brother, if he sets a goal, he's going to do it. So he scheduled a marathon. He went through all the training. I helped a little bit, but we found people to help him out. And so he got better and better, lost 100 pounds. In October, there's Tom on end at the end, waving this big $50,000 check, and my brother finished. And it's an amazing feat. But there's another story to this is that he then used that money to build our first store in Lafayette, Louisiana. But anyhow, the thing about Richard is that he could, anytime he sets a goal, he's very focused and he gets it done. And so it was fun to see him do that.
Hey, so Glenn, one of the things that we chatted about during the break was this ability to inspire people to be the best they could be. I think Zig Ziglar said, if you help people get what you want out of life, if you help people get what they want out of life, you'll get what you want out of life. But this whole notion of building these teams within these RPM stores and then these regions and then franchisees and that's not something that's happenstance. That's something that you got to tap into people to get the best out of them. He must have been really good at that.
He's very good. He had a different set of glasses. He sort of, my grandmother did say, she'd never say anything negative about somebody. But anyhow, he didn't look for the negative. He couldn't see the negative, which, anyhow, he had this different set of glasses where he looked really at the positive. What's their passion, and he would try to get that out of them and help, and then encourage them. And so that's why so many of our drivers, wound up, franchising or managing our stores. So he had that unique ability, but wherever he went, within the family, anything, I could go on, but just an incredible ability to see the strengths in people. And again,
so you suddenly have to, in the aftermath of his death, you have to deal with a void. How are you doing? How's it going?
How am I doing?
Yeah, how are you doing?
Oh man, I'm day at a time type thing. I'm really inspired by his wife Linda, who's they were married 54 years, and she and I talk regularly. And we've got things we got to do, and we're staying busy. But we know that one thing, the picture that she chose to pick out of all of them to be by his funeral and by his casket, but anyhow, was that running that marathon. And it wasn't so much about him running a marathon and getting this prize of 50,000. It was about winning the ultimate prize and living your life as if, when you get to go to heaven, basically. And that's how he lived his life. That's
beautiful. And God bless you, my friend. Cynthia, it's been inspiring to reflect about someone like him who, people are going to see the train museum and they're going to appreciate the train museum, but maybe this show will give them an opportunity of better understanding the man that was behind it all. But what a tribute to someone to say that he lived a life that was focused on helping people get the most out of their lives. I mean, what a beautiful tribute to someone like Richard in saying that, There's
no doubt. And one of the things that comes out of having a relationship with a person like that is that you want to be more like that yourself. And so there are a lot of ways to build a legacy. But if you have at any point been around someone and then stop in the future as you're making a decision or looking at a choice to say, if he were here right now, what would he tell me to do? That's the greatest compliment. And that's one that I hope all of us could have. But I certainly know that Richard has that.
There is no doubt about it. No doubt about it. Hey, listen, I would be remiss if I didn't say, how are things going at the museum? We got just like a minute left.
The museum is going gangbustingly well. We've topped over 50,000 people that have attended since we opened our doors in June. And we know that we have all these field trips coming in. We're seeing now up to 50 and 100 at one time. We are expecting this month to be our spring break, and their numbers will increase. We saw over 1,000 people here just last week. So those are things that we know we've built something that's meaningful to other people. We're getting comments when we do surveys with folks about, I loved it with my family. I'm bringing my school groups back here. And so those are things that tell you found the sweet spot, the place where people want to be. And for the community, that's a great thing. Bringing folks in from the outside makes that even more a positive thing for this community. So
congratulations on achieving that success, Glenn Mueller and Cynthia, and God bless your family, Glenn and Richard's family. And boy, it's clear from one thing is for sure from this conversation: Richard Mueller's legacy will live on for a long, long time. Have a great day, and we will see you tomorrow.
Thanks, Ricky.